Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's session titled From Bean Counters to Business Partners, Evolving CPA Roles in the Middle East. My name is Ubaid Rahman, and I'm a financial trainer at Kaplan Professional Middle East with almost 2 decades of experience in accounts, tax, and audit, and including consultancy. And more than a decade, I have been here in the Middle East. And it's a privilege to connect with such a distinguished group of professionals here. And joining me is Ms. Dennis Probert, who is a teaching assistant professor at University of Colorado, Boulder, USA. Good morning on your side, and a warm welcome to you, Dennis.
Thank you.
If you want to add to your introduction, you can add. You're more than welcome.
Hi, I'm Denise Probert, and I am a teaching assistant professor at the University of Colorado in Boulder, Colorado, and I teach primarily their mergers and acquisitions accounting course and their financial statement analysis course, mostly to graduate students, although I do have the privilege of working with undergraduate students as well. I have decades of experience working out in industry, in the ed tech industry. And so my career has been dedicated to applying my CPA accounting knowledge to education. I am a CPA, US CPA, and CGMA.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dennis. So now I'll briefly let you know about what we are going to do over the next 1 hour. Basically, we'll explore how the CPA designation has evolved from a technical qualification into a symbol of strategic influence, and how this evolution is reshaping business leadership in the Middle East. So we have a lot to cover in this 1 hour. Dennis will start by initially giving us a bit of a perspective on the growth of CPA designation globally. And then I'll take over and talk more about the Middle East and the transformation and the changes that are happening in Middle East and how CPA's role is changing in the Middle East. And then we'll go back to Dennis later on, where she will talk about the changing CPA roles and the skill sets needed for future CPAs. And maybe at the end, we'll keep around 5 to 10 minutes for a bit of questions that all of you might have. So this is the plan. I'll hand over to you, Dennis, for the first slide, which is on growth of CPA designation globally.
Excellent. Thank you. So I received this information from the AICPA, which is the American Institute of CPAs. And this shows the candidates who have been taking the exam sections over the last 18, 20 years. And what you'll see is that the exam has become more interesting to global candidates. The top of each bar represents the amount of interest globally. And what you'll see is that it is growing. The stars on this particular graph only indicate the drop-off in exam interest. And we did just have a big exam change in 2024. And so we're seeing those numbers rebound now in 2025, which is not shown on this slide. But I do want to emphasize that the demand for CPAs, US CPAs, is growing significantly. We have the baby boomer population in the United States, and a large number of the CPAs who will be retiring in the next 10 years is phenomenal. So we would love to know more about your interest in the US CPA and would encourage you to pursue that designation.
Okay, right. Thank you, Dennis, for these insights from global perspective. Now we'll move on to the discussion towards Middle East and how the accounting profession is evolving in the Middle East. And the main question here is that the accounting profession is evolving in the Middle East, and are the accountants and CPAs, like all of you professionals who have joined here, are you evolving along with it? So this will be the focus of most of our discussion in the upcoming webinar slides that we're going to go through. because the accountants now in the Middle Eastern region are no more the bean counters in that old historic role of accounting and bookkeeping and number crunching only, but they're going towards more of a strategic role where they will be invited to the boardrooms and they will contribute to the long-term strategic decisions of companies, and also in a more of an advisory role and a consultancy role that is emerging in Middle East over the years. So this is what the change is. And and this change is happening because of a lot of changes that happened in the Middle East in the last 10 years or so, almost less than a decade, and so many changes have happened. And in the next slides, obviously we are going to go through, like in the Middle East there has been the introduction of, for example, Saudi Vision 2030 and the UAE's Vision 2031. And then also the biggest change and the big game changer was the taxation, which means that a lot more involvement of CPAs has got involved into the strategic roles, into the advisory roles. And we have seen a huge influx of advisory CPA firms in Middle East in the last 10 years. And we'll be talking more about that in the upcoming slides as well. So let's continue and talk about the Middle Eastern transformation. But before that, I would want you to get involved, because it'll be good to make the session interactive. So at the very start, before even I start discussing the Middle Eastern transformation, I would want all of you to maybe join me in a poll where we are asking that, do you feel your current role allows strategic involvement? And the options obviously are yes, no, or unsure. Just give me a moment. I'll uh, enable the poll. Okay, I hope you can see this poll on your screens, all of you, and you can respond to it. The options obviously are yes, no, or unsure. And while you answer, I will want you to also keep reflecting on this question, because more or less this question will be the main focus of our discussion moving forward in this particular webinar that we are having. So I'm just waiting for your responses, and then we'll go ahead on that. Okay, so I think we have got the responses. What I can see from the responses, the answer to yes is a 67%. That means majority of you are saying that you have some strategic involvement in your role, and that automatically shows that already the change is visible in your organizations and in your roles as well, that you are participating at the strategic level in your organizations. And let me tell you that this role is going to grow even further in the upcoming years, in line with the transformation that is happening in the Middle East. And you will get more and more involved into the strategic decision making, and in more of an advisory and consultancy role in your organizations in the upcoming years. So that is what we are going to talk about from the next slide onwards. It was good to get responses from all you guys. That means you're involved here, and we can keep this question in our mind and move on to the next slide here, which is about the Middle East transformation. And let me tell you that in the last 1 decade, in fact, less than a decade, there has been a huge transformation throughout Middle East, and especially in Saudi Arabia and UAE, which are two of the strongest countries in Middle East. So there has been Saudi Vision introduction, which is the Vision 2030. It was introduced in 2016. And then the UAE Vision 2031, which was introduced later in 2022. So both of them being introduced within the span of less than a decade here. And then the big change and the big game changer, which is the introduction of tax, which also started less than a decade ago. So in less than a decade, there has been a huge transformation economically in Middle East. And we can clearly see that there is a diversification away from the old oil-dependent economy and moving to a much more diversified economy where so many other sectors are getting involved. And this whole transformation, let me tell you, cannot succeed without financial governance and without the transparency involved in financially. And that is where the CPAs and the accountants get involved. And that is where they will have to play a big role in bringing that governance and transparency, which will make sure that one of the key aims of all these visions, which is to bring foreign investment into the Middle East, is succeeded. Because without proper financial governance and without proper financial transparency, attracting global investors, it is difficult. And this is where then CPAs and accountants have to play a role, because they are the ones who will make sure that those disclosures are given to the investors, which give them that confidence to bring the investment into the Middle East and into these countries. So it has been a huge change, and we'll be talking about these three actually changes mainly in the upcoming slides. The Saudi Vision 2030 and how it links to the CPA roles here in the Middle East, then the UAE Vision 2031, and again we'll see how that links to the CPA and accountant roles here, and then the tax introduction, the big change, and how it has already affected the role of CPAs and accountants in the Middle East, and how it is in future going to affect this role further. So let's move forward on to the next slide, and that is about the Saudi Vision 2030. One clarification here before you go deep into it and we discuss about it, and that is the highlights which are mentioned here are not actually the agenda of the Saudi Vision. These are those parts of Saudi Vision which have a connection with the CPA role in the Middle East. So the first one, as we can see here, driving financial transparency and governance, which I was just talking about also. This is what actually attracts the foreign investment. And one of the key agendas of Saudi Vision 2030 is to bring in foreign investment into Saudi Arabia. And, obviously, one big example of that was the Aramco IPO, which happened a few years back. And that was one of the biggest IPOs in the history ever. And that attracted huge global investment. But just think about it, that how did that IPO succeed, and how that huge global investment came. Behind that was a lot of work on making sure that the disclosures were given in such detail to those global investors, and so perfectly to those global investors, that they had the confidence to invest in the country and in that IPO. So this is just one example, and so many more IPOs like that are happening, have happened already, and are going to happen in the upcoming years. Because one of the agendas that we can see here is the third one here is privatization. And privatization means more and more IPOs, and that would mean more and more disclosure requirements, where the accountants and CPAs have to play the biggest role. And imagine behind that Aramco IPO that happened, maybe hundreds of finance professionals might have worked to make sure that those disclosures were transparent and perfect to attract that global investment. So that is one very important part of the Saudi Vision, where the CPAs and the accountants will have to play a role, and this is going to keep on increasing as we go further in future. Then diversification. I have already told you that UAE and Saudi Arabia both are diversifying from their old oil-based economy to a very much diversified economy, where they are starting multiple new projects and going into different areas. Like Saudi is planning to invest, and they have invested already in sports, entertainment, into technology, telecommunications. So these are new tourism. So these are new areas that are developing there, which was not as much part of the economy earlier, as it is now, and it is going to increase in future as well. So behind every new project, there has to be evaluation of the feasibility of that project. Behind every new project, there has to be an evaluation of the risks related to that project, an assessment of the risks. And that is where, again, the role of accountants and CPAs will get involved. So this is much different from their normal historic number crunching role of just being bookkeepers and preparing financial reports. And now it's more about evaluation of the feasibility, assessing risks about those new projects. Think about that Neom City project in Saudi Arabia. Now that is a $500 billion mega city project. Now think about it, that behind that, how much of finance work and accounting work will be involved on the back of it, and just to make sure that all those projects as part of that Neom city are assessed properly, the risks related to them, the feasibilities related to them. So this all needs the work of CPAs and the accountants to get involved. Third one is privatization. I've already told you that that means IPOs will get involved, and more private companies come into existence, and that means private investors, global investors coming in, and that needs a lot of disclosures to give them the confidence to invest. And the disclosure role, again, takes you to CPAs and to the accounting professionals who have to make sure that those disclosures are properly given to the global investors. And then comes the last one, which is digital and ESG transformation. ESG, environmental, social governance, this has become a huge thing worldwide, and also is part of the Saudi Vision 2030, which means sustainability is something that is becoming very, very important. Climate change, investors are looking to invest globally also, and in the Middle East also, in those companies which are going to be doing good for sustainability, and will be giving them disclosures about sustainability and climate change with regards to what they are doing. So that means more reporting will get involved, like integrated reports, sustainability reports, climate change reports, and so many more disclosures other than the normal financial statements that we used to have. And these reports obviously are going to include details about the plans, future plans of the companies, and their human capital, where that is going to be utilized, the risks that they are facing, the opportunities that they are going to have in future, and then climate related risks and opportunities, sustainability related risks and opportunities, which then involves a lot of non-financial disclosures and reporting, and KPIs related to sustainability and climate change being reported. Now, this is where CPAs have to develop their skill set now for the future reporting, because investors are looking for these disclosures in order to give them the confidence to invest in these companies, because sustainability and climate change and all these ESG aspects have become very important globally, globally as well as in the Middle East. You can see here it's part of the Saudi Vision 2030 agenda as well. Okay, now let's move on to the UAE Vision 2031. More or less, things are similar. So I'll quickly go through them as well, some of the key highlights where CPA role gets involved and gets linked here. So the first one is compliance to strategic tax leadership. So one of the biggest changes in UAE has been taxation, and historically the role of accountants and CPAs, when if we go one decade before, there was no tax in the Middle East at all. From a complete tax-free economy and zone to a fully regulated tax economy, it has converted. So now the role is also not only going to be just compliance, ticking the boxes and filling the returns to the tax authorities, but it is also going to be from a strategic perspective. Strategic tax leadership will have to be shown by the CPAs and the accountants here in the Middle East, so that they help the board and the management of the company in taking decisions in tax planning, because now no decision can be taken uh, here in the Middle East without considering the impact of tax, for example, corporation tax or VAT, as a result of that decision. So in that case, then CPAs will have to play an advisory role, which I have been talking about repeatedly, the consultancy role for the board, for the management, in helping them take those decisions, and the strategic long-term decisions of the company will be impacted by all that. And here the tax perspective has to be presented ultimately by the accountants and the CPAs. Then embedding governance and investor confidence. We have talked about that aspect already, but here I'll make it a bit different by saying, what do we mean by financial governance here, just to give a bit more clarity. And that is about implementing those policies and procedures and approval structures and documentations that are needed to enable an organization to present their financial information accurately and transparently to the investors or to the potential investors. So that system, who will implement that system, or who will help the organization in implementing that system? It's ultimately the accountants and the CPAs who will have to play that role in making sure that those policies and structures and procedures and the governance system is set up to make sure transparent information is provided to the investors. Then the next point in the UAE Vision 2031 is financial insight to strategy. And that means this reminds me of one CEO who told me once that, now we are not looking from our accountants that they tell us about what happened in the last month or last year, but we are thinking about, or we are looking from them that they will tell us what will happen in the next month or in the next year. So it's about bringing those future financial insights and then helping the management take future long-term decisions, which are the strategic decisions. That is the role now which CPAs have to play. So it's not that old historic role of historic reporting, but it's also future looking and forward looking role that they have to play. Then ESG and integrated reporting. I've already talked a bit about integrated reporting, and that means that now CPAs will have to develop that skill set where they might be, asked, for example, to present carbon reduction achievements in financial terms. Now, this might be a new term, but now CPAs have to get used to that, because this is now going to become a key part of reporting, especially in integrated reports, sustainability reports. Maybe another thing that they might have to do is that how do we report on social impact alongside profit, or some sustainability related or climate change related KPIs like CO2 emissions or water savings or waste reduction or waste disposal. So these aspects have to be given importance, and CPAs have to develop that skill set, because they will have to play a role in helping the organization, giving those disclosures in these sustainability and integrated reports, so that the investors get that confidence. Because I've already said that globally and as well as in Middle East, and you can see in both Saudi Vision and UAE Vision, sustainability plays a key role, especially in UAE. It's a prime focus here. And therefore, now, investors are looking for those disclosures, which will tell them, and CPAs have to develop that skill set to be able to, sort of disclose that information to the investors which they want. Then artificial intelligence is one of the core agendas of the UAE Vision 2031. Remember, UAE is focusing on investing more in artificial intelligence, fintech, and so they are trying to get into that digital economy zone as well. So that means a lot of artificial intelligence involvement is needed from a CPA or an accountant perspective also in their roles, while advising or while providing consultancy. They will have to involve artificial intelligence in their work, and also other IT technologies that are involved, like data analytics and so many other softwares and technologies that are coming up. So they will have to keep themselves updated and develop those skills to be able to utilize these things in their work, and then provide that advisory and the strategic advice that they are going to provide to the board, let's say, of a company. So this was about the UAE vision. Now we go on to taxation part. I'm looking at the time also. I'll try to wrap it up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So on the Middle East part, then we'll go to Danis, and she'll talk about the CPA, roles and skill set from a CPA perspective. So taxation in Middle East has been a game changer, and in less than 10 years, it all started. Before, if you go before 2016, I've been here even before that. So there was no tax, there was no concept of tax. Okay, here, and suddenly in 2016, contract was signed between GCC countries for VAT. We'll see, have a look at in the next slide on the tax timeline also, Middle East tax timeline. And then it started, then came VAT, and then came corporation tax, excise tax, transfer pricing, and now we are hearing that some of the GCC states are also have announced the introduction of personal income tax soon. So that means tax is a big change here, and it is continuously changing, and it is going to change even further. That means more tax will get involved, and it is going to stay here in the Middle East. So that means a huge shift for the CPA roles here. And we have seen in the last 10 years or so, there has been a huge influx of consultancy and advisory CPA firms in the Middle East. A huge, we'll see some statistics later on, that there has been a huge increase. And what that means is that CPAs have to now play that advisory and strategic role here, apart from the normal financial statement and accountancy and bookkeeping role that has been historically the case. In fact, before 2016, I was performing audits here, and I saw small and medium companies, almost most of them, they did not have even an automated accounting system in place. They had mostly manual systems. Some even had, manual registers on which only sales and purchases were being recorded, and hardly there were any accounting staff involved. And now suddenly there has been a lot of taxation, and now those family businesses that have been here, who never maybe considered or thought about tax related risks, are now thinking about them. They're developing corporate structures and involving CPAs and accountants into their strategic decision making, because they need the advice from a tax perspective on how their business and the decisions are going to get affected because of this tax. So it's a huge change. Transfer pricing is a big thing for big companies, especially where the company sells between divisions. So then you have to, to avoid the manipulation of tax. In every tax law, there are some guidelines on transfer pricing, and in UAE and Saudi corporation tax law also, there are very heavy requirements for documentation with regards to transfer pricing, and there are strong regulations there. So CPAs will guide the organizations in complying with those regulations, and in taking decisions where for the pricing is a decision. So in taking decisions for the pricing where they comply with those regulations and those documentary requirements that exist. So this tells you how big a change it is for the accountants and CPAs. Let's have a look at that text timeline here. So you can see that it started in 2016-17, where the GCC VAT framework was signed between all the GCC countries. And then 2018, Saudi and UAE implemented 5% VAT. And next year in 2019 and 20, then KSA, because pandemic came, so KSA changed the VAT from 5% to 15%, a huge change. And that tells you that it's not just about revenue earning for the government, but it's about the economic resilience. Because of the pandemic, they had to shift the rates from 5% to 15%. And then Oman also announced VAT. Then 2021, Oman introduced VAT. Bahrain has introduced in 2022. And then UAE announced 2022 corporation tax, which was huge. And then 2023, corporation tax became effective in UAE, and also in Saudi Arabia, it's already effective. The UAE rate is 9% for any profits above 375,000. And then corporation tax brings with it the transfer pricing regulations as well. So it's a huge law, and I can see since 2023 it is implemented, but I can see on a daily basis these rules are getting updated, and that is where the CPAs have to play a role. That is where their advisory gets involved, their consultancy role gets involved, not only as a consultancy firm or advisory firm, but also the CPAs and accountants within the organization now have to advise on a day-to-day basis according to the updates that are happening, let's say in corporation tax, to their organizations, because these all laws are going to affect the decisions of the company, and decisions will have to consider the tax implications as well. For example, if a company wants to maybe start a branch within UAE, so they will have to decide whether to start it in mainland or in free zone, because both have different corporation tax implications, and who will advise the board on that? And that's the accountants and CPAs here. So this is a big change that is happening from an advisory and strategic perspective, and the role of CPAs is becoming very, very important. Now, have a look at this statistics, which just confirms all of that points that I was raising again and again, that advisory and consultancy and strategic role of CPA is becoming more and more important. Have a look at this, that Middle East tax advisory market grew by 13% in just the year 2024 and by another 11% in 2025, reaching to a staggering $840 million industry. Whereas you go to before 2018, there was no advisory tax related firm here in UAE because there was no need. It was tax free economy. And this also is confirmed by this statistic on the right-hand side here, which is from the FTA, Federal Tax Authority of UAE, which shows that tax agent registry is done by the firms, advisory firms, tax advisory firms, to get registered with FTA. That increased between 2022 to 2023. 10 times increase in visits happened in that tax agent registry, and this is the same time when corporation tax got implemented in UAE, and now it has been increasing continuously from there since then. And for those working in the organizations as accountants or CPAs, you can see the salary growth over the last 3 years per year has been 5 to 10% per year. This means the organizations are expecting CPAs to become more and more important. In fact, this reminds me of one friend of mine who is a CFO, and he told me that when the tax got implemented in UAE, suddenly the accountants became more important than the sales managers in our company overnight. So this tells you the importance and the increasing role in the strategic decision making of the CPAs, and that is depicted from this statistic here in front of you. So this was about the statistics. Now, last thing here, and then maybe we'll go to a poll and we'll shift to Dennis. So role of CPAs in the tax era, I've already summarized while discussing, but I'll repeat it briefly. Tax planning, tax strategy, that is going to be the key. Like I told you, that if, for example, a company is thinking about acquiring another company, so they will have to now see the tax implications of that, the corporation tax implications of that when they merge with another company or they acquire another company. Then tax risk assessment. The CPAs will have to play a role in all of these aspects. Tax risk assessment is, for example, penalties. Missing a VAT deadline here in UAE can lead to a maximum penalty of 300% of underpaid tax. That's huge. Companies cannot bear that. Companies cannot bear that. I remember there was one client of mine in the F&B business here, small company, and initially when the VAT came, they took it lightly. Later, they had a tax audit from FTA, and it was found that they were misclassifying the zero-rated items, and that led to a penalty which nearly wiped off their annual profits. So now CPAs were ultimately the ones who saved the company later and guided the company in such a way that they started complying with the tax regulations. So this is where they have to play a role. Then advice on transfer pricing. I've told you that transfer pricing is having a lot of regulations, a lot of documentation requirements here, and the CPAs will have to ensure that in this pricing decision for the sales between, let's say, divisions of a company, those regulations are taken care of, and the documentation requirements are met. Then VAT strategy, obviously VAT affects your whole supply chain, your suppliers, your customers. For example, for retailers whose customers are mostly individuals, they will have to think about that if they have to add VAT into the price, should they add it inclusive of VAT, like in the existing price, or should they add the VAT separately? Because if they add it inclusive, they lose their profit, and if they add it separately, they lose the customer. Why they lose the customer? Because the individual customer cannot claim input VAT on their purchases as per the rules here. So this is a decision that has to be taken, and the CPAs have to guide their boards and management in making sure that they take the correct decision in this regard. Otherwise, they can end up either losing profit or losing their customers, which is a big impact on a business. And then the last point, integrate tax into business decisions. Like we have said, all decisions you will have to consider tax, and CPAs therefore have to get involved on the boardroom. And I already talked about acquisition, but let's talk about another aspect of acquisition. Let's say a company is taking a decision to acquire another company, but before that, they will need a CPA or a CPA firm to perform due diligence on that new company which they are trying to acquire, to make sure that that company does not have any deferred tax liabilities maybe in their balance sheet, which the investor will not want to have, and it will not be a good sign for the investor. So therefore, these things, the CPA involvement and the accountant involvement at a strategic level, as at an advisory level, at a consultancy level, becomes very, very important. So this was the crux of the whole discussion that I've had. Now I'm closing it down from my side with a poll here, which is about your current role in your organization. So all of you, those participants online, you can get involved here again, and you can let me know maybe on which part of your current role takes up most of your time. And the options that we have are, I'll enable the poll, I'll launch it. Options are compliance and reporting. Then we have tax and regulation, analysis and strategy, and technology and data work. Just give me a moment. I will launch the poll. Yes, I hope you can see it on your screens. You can quickly answer that. And while you're answering, I'll tell you about something which a CPA in Riyadh told me recently. Riyadh is in Saudi Arabia, and he told me that he thought when he joined there, he thought his job will be preparing financial statements, but he now spends most of his time in strategic meetings or strategy related meetings rather than in accounting software. So that is how the change is happening. That is the shift that we have been talking about. Forward-looking advisory, forward-looking consultancy, and a strategic role is what is the future in the Middle East and globally also for CPAs and for the accountants here. Okay, so I think we have got some results. I'm still waiting for the results on the poll. Okay, so I'm ending the poll. I've seen that 80% of the participants have said that they have a compliance and reporting role, which means that they still have that compliance and reporting role mainly, but now this is going to change. As you grow in your roles, this is going to change. In future years in the Middle East, this is going to change, and there'll be more involvement from a decision-making perspective, from a strategic perspective, and from an advisory or a consultancy nature perspective in the upcoming years. So with this thought, I'll stop here, and I'll hand over to Dennis. And from here on, Dennis will talk about the CPA roles and the skill set that is needed for the future CPAs. Over to you, Dennis.
Thank you so much. You know, when I was listening to you, Ayubad, I thought to myself about what an opportunity the participants of this webinar have to be able to hear all of your expertise about the regional changes and the local changes and the tax changes. I hope that you realize that the value of the information you just received. It's so extremely important. And I believe I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. I love this quote. And it sounds to me like today's the opportunity to think about what role you can play. How can you contribute to this profession? The quote is by Samantha Wilson. It says, "The best accountants don't just see numbers, they see the potential for financial transformation." So what I hope to give you today is an idea of the ways in which you can develop your own skills to be the most that you want to be in the accounting profession. And I'm ready for the next slide, Ubad. I think that we have traditionally thought of accountants as bean counters, and as Ubad has said, in the past, it's been about reporting and compliance, debits and credits. But today, our role is changing. It's about complexity. When I was listening to you about, I thought, this is complex, this is complicated. And the CPA of today is a translator of that complexity, somebody who can understand the complexity and make sense of it. It's somebody who can be a strategic partner. It's somebody who is the trusted voice at the table with the CEO and the CFO. So we're today now looking at strategy and risk and how to drive growth rather than just being a historian. Now you're the navigator of the future. So let's move on and discuss what that might look like. And I am ready for the next slide, please. So supporting CEOs and CFOs is it's a partnership. You're going to be arm in arm in translating financial data into actionable insights. What do executive leaders want? They want somebody who can give clear, actionable insights. Providing certainty or clarity in uncertain times. This is somebody who is a trusted partner. They have credibility. They can bring clarity to decisions. They unravel the complexity that we're hearing about. And then strengthen credibility of decisions with financial rigor. Having financial discipline differentiates a very successful corporate executive from an unsuccessful one. Having that ability to understand how financial discipline can bring advantage to your organization. Let's move on to the next slide, where I want to talk about managing risk in a complex world and the role that the CPA has in this. Now, risk is not just about financial loss, it's also about reputation, compliance. It's about making strategic missteps. And so when we're looking at managing risk in a complex world as a CPA, we're looking at understanding enterprise risk management, or ERM, understanding cybersecurity and digital transformation, understanding those risks that come with having a global supply chain. These are all areas where today's CPA is providing insights that will protect the organization from that financial loss or loss of reputation or risk associated with compliance or non-compliance and those strategic missteps. Let's look at the next slide. Let's talk about digital investments, because this is an area that we've, well, number one, I noticed several of you who answered the poll suggested you were influential in the digital aspects of your organization. The CPA has an ever-increasing role in evaluating the ROI of technology projects. I was speaking to one of my clients recently about moving the manufacturing environment to robots. And a robotic or automated environment makes sense. It sounds fantastic, but it's also very expensive still. And so balancing that investment in technology like robotics or automation requires the CPA's touch, the CPA's knowledge. So being able to evaluate the financial impact of technology investments is a huge role that the accountant is playing. Ensuring data integrity and compliance, being able to trust the data that you have because you're going to be making important decisions with that information. Finally, supporting automation and AI adoption. I don't think we're turning back on automation or AI. And so being able to strategically integrate AI allows the CPA to move into that strategic role where we're really needed and trust the AI and the automation to handle what has traditionally been the accountant's role in financial reporting. So this is a new era of digital stewardship, and the financial expertise that we possess as CPAs helps guide that journey. Let's look at the next slide where I just wanted to mention ESG and sustainability. As you discussed, it's becoming more and more important. It's no longer optional. And so CPAs have taken on a new critical role of ensuring that we have accurate and reliable ESG reporting, and being able to link that cost of sustainability to long-term value is extremely important. It helps companies meet investor and regulatory expectations. Let's imagine you have either $1 million or $1 billion that you want to invest in a company, and you want to see as much information as you can find about those companies. The reporting that the accountant is driving and the data the accountant is ensuring that you have is clean, and the transparency around ESG and sustainability will help you decide who you want to invest in. And so that role of the CPA is becoming more and more important. Let's move forward to the next slide. Role in M&A and expansion. This is where my expertise is as a CPA, being able to ensure that the due diligence is solid. I often tell my students that when you're making an acquisition, it takes a long time to understand what's in all the drawers and closets, which is my way of saying it's a complex project. It takes a long time to fully understand what you've purchased. So being able to lead that due diligence and be able to provide your insights on valuation is extremely important. Being able to structure those deals so that they're sustainable long-term and provide value to the financial health of the organization is critical. And finally, the post-merger or post-acquisition integration is so important. I've been in so many of these situations where we've made an acquisition, and now what? Well, you have to be able to provide leadership through those post-acquisition times where you are integrating the different functions in your organization. And the CPA plays a huge role in that. So we have a lot of ambitious growth in your region, and I commend that. So the expertise being required of CPAs in your area has never been greater. Let's move on to the next slide and talk about the skills for the modern CPA. What do you need to succeed? Well, you need both technical and strategic thinking. You need to be able to communicate well and lead effectively. You also have to be comfortable with change and be agile, and you also have to be comfortable with digital tools. Technology is not going away. It's just getting more advanced every single day. You need the ability to lead, not just calculate. So we need critical thinkers and problem solvers and people who play well on teams. We need judgment, agility. We need influence. So let's look at that more particularly. In summary, if you aspire to shape strategy in an organization, or if you want to be at the decision-making table, the CPA designation will get you there. The CPA designation isn't just about accounting, it's about influence, it's about trust, and it's about leadership. So I've prepared a little set of slides to help you understand what you can do next. let's go through those skill sets for the new CPA, and we can advance right to the next slide, Ubad. Understanding that the time is ticking away here, the role of this CPA is undergoing a profound transformation. What once centered primarily around technical competence is now expanding into a much broader and more impactful arena. Today's CPAs aren't just record keepers, they're strategic business partners, tech-savvy advisors, influential communicators. All of this is important. The first item listed here is from technical accountant of the past to a strategic advisor. The foundation still matters. You still need to understand the standards, but the expectation now is much higher. Today's CPA, they have to understand business models, market dynamics, strategic priorities, because financial insights are no longer just about financial reports, they're about real-time decision-making. So it's extremely important that the CPA be influential as well. So let's talk about going from just compliance to insight and influence. Compliance, it's table stakes. The real value comes when a CPA can turn that data into actionable insight. It means being able to ask questions, find patterns, advise leaders with clarity. It means building trust, having relationships. It's not just about getting the numbers right, but it's also about showing what it means. So today's CPA must be influential and must be able to provide insight. Finally, the future-ready CPAs blend finance for rigor, technology for scale and automation, and communication to be able to tell the story behind the numbers. You don't have to be an expert coder or a data scientist. In fact, a lot of AI is taking over that for us. But you do need to be able to speak the language of analytics, understand what the tools can do, know what to ask for, and explain it all in a way that others can understand. Let's move forward to the next slide, Ubad, and talk about data analytics a little bit more. So when you are looking at data analytics, the ability to extract meaning from large data sets is extremely important. Data literacy means understanding what we have, what we need, what it means, and how to ask the right questions. Analytical thinking requires that we understand how to use tools like Excel, Power BI, Tableau, or even Python to uncover trends, patterns. Visualization allows us to communicate that complex information into a dashboard or a chart or a presentation that others understand clearly. These skills are not just nice to have, they're becoming core requirements in a lot of accounting roles, especially if you're in strategic finance or FP&A or advisory work. Let's move on to the next slide, please, and talk about communication. When you're thinking about accounting and finance professionals, you just heard from an expert. Ubad had time to tell us stories to make it relevant to us. And that's what we need to be able to do, is we need to be able to work with numbers, but also translate those complex financials into plain language. Every number has a story behind it. What happened, why it matters, and what's at stake. Those financial reports summarize all of the decisions that were made in the boardroom. So our job is to connect the data to the bigger picture, to the strategy, to our operations, to the decisions at hand. We do have to have clarity, which means that we are clear in our communication. We must speak a language that fits our audience, whether we're talking to the CEO, an executive, a board member, a department leader, an investor, or to our teams. Not everybody needs to have an accounting degree to be able to understand what we're telling them. Finally, we need to have confidence to be able to present our financial information in a way that will help others make million-dollar, billion-dollar decisions. So storytelling builds trust. It allows us to make those numbers memorable in a way that will ensure that we replicate our good decisions and try to minimize any bad decisions that happen to come along. So that's when your value really skyrockets. Today, we are in an ever-increasing regulatory environment. And what we do know is that the best accountants don't just interpret numbers, they decipher the language in a financial successful way that also ensures our regulatory compliance is spot on. So when it comes to things like tax or ESG or technology, we need to understand that regulatory change happens. And so being on top of all of those regulatory changes is extremely important. Maybe you're part of compliance already and you understand how the different markets have different requirements and the different regulatory agencies have different requirements. It's a lot to keep track of, and it requires somebody with the sophisticated knowledge of both the business and the regulations and the standards of accounting. I think I just have a few more slides left, and this next one I created to help kind of communicate with you the T-shaped CPA. The T-shaped CPA is somebody who has deep technical expertise, and they also have broad skills in analytics, technology, leadership, and communication. So I wanted to leave that with you with that visual, and that wraps up in summary. Thank you for your attention and for your energy today. I think we do have a few minutes for questions. Remember that today's CPA is more than a scorekeeper. We're also storytellers, we're data translators, we're strategic navigators. This is your moment. It sounds like you are in an environment right now that needs you to explore this opportunity.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dennis, for that insightful presentation. Now, as we come to the end, those who are participating, if you have any questions, we'll allocate maybe 5 minutes for that. If you can type in to chat, if you have any questions, then we'll respond to that. Yeah, please, it's up to you. And you can post your questions in the chat. Okay, so one question that we have got, which I will, maybe forward to Dennis, if you can briefly ask. I think it's related to the CPA, that what is the skill set in summary that would be needed for, the CPAs going forward in future? In summary, if you can tell us. I think we'll keep it to this question because we have completed 1 hour, and you can respond to this, and then after that, hopefully we'll close.
Well, first of all, this changes almost daily as automation changes, but in the future, we will continue to have the skill set around auditing, which is your background, Ubad. We're going to have that evolving, but we're still going to need to have auditors. We're going to have we have an increasing demand for tax experts, especially from the strategy perspective, tax planning. We're going to continue to need to have standard setters, individuals who have expertise in applying those standards. And then finally, in each of those areas, there is a higher level of expertise. So today's CPA has the opportunity to choose a discipline. So the current CPA exam, for example, has a tax exam, audit exam, and a financial accounting and reporting standards exam. And then each of those has a discipline that allows you to demonstrate your skill at a more advanced level. So I think that is what the profession is telling us is needed right now. Compliance has never been more important. So that would be my short answer.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. And that means that the CPA qualification is covering all those skill sets
Yes.
that are needed for this role that is emerging for CPAs and accountants. Okay, thank you very much, Dennis, and thanks to all of you for joining us today, because we are almost out of time, so we'll stop here, and we look forward to seeing you in more such Kaplan webinars in future. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.